And I'd like to welcome you to the House, Minister Brophy, and to thank you for taking this motion and to commend Senators Mullen and McDowell for initiating the motion. And on behalf of the Labour Senators, I'm very glad to support it, and indeed we co-signed the motion along with other colleagues across the House. And I think it's very important that we do so, that we show solidarity with the Uyghur people, and that we make these calls on the government to condemn the oppression of the Uyghur population unreservedly, and indeed to call on China to bring to an immediate end the practices that we've been reading about and hearing about, and to allow UN human rights monitors to access detention centres in the region. Minister, I do acknowledge, of course, in your own speech you made extensive reference to what the Irish government has done, and it would be useful to get a copy of the speech. I was scribbling away, so I wanted to try and ensure I had taken it all down. But I do think we need to do more as a nation. I think particularly as we now have a seat on the Security Council, it does mean that we have a responsibility really to speak up and really to seek to put pressure on China insofar as we can, as a small nation, sure, but also within the EU, where we do have a significant voice. And I do also want to pay tribute to the reporting that we've seen, and other colleagues have mentioned this, particularly Ivana Murray, whose reports for RTE have been absolutely chilling, just to see, to see how she was treated by authorities in China, and to see her reports from inside the region. And I would just like to express my own thanks to Chloe Manahan in my office, who did a lot of research for this when we were looking at this motion and looking at today's debate. I know there's been very much a recent focus, and I've spoken about Ivana Murray's reporting and recent reports, but of course there is a long legacy or a long history to the treatment of the Uyghur people. Colleagues will be aware that in 2014, some 6 years ago, the Chinese government created a comprehensive so-called national security legal architecture to really begin or to continue an oppression of Uyghur Muslims, who comprise about 45%, I think, of the population in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region in China. And I should say I'm somebody who's visited China a couple of times and who's aware of the sort of human rights abuses, as we all are indeed, but it's quite visible when one is in China to see the sort of treatment that goes on in particularly in areas that are more remote from the big cities of Beijing and Shanghai on the coast. But we know since 2014 the process of abuse of the rights of the Uyghur population has intensified. A set of discriminatory so-called regulations on de-extremification, which were adopted in 2017, which had a very serious effect on the Uyghur population. And of course, since 2014, as far as we know, the beginning of the mass detention camps that others have spoken about and that were the focus of the recent reports on RTE. The misnomer, and I think Senator McDowell talked about this, the misnomer that they're called in China Centres for Transformation Through Education and various other titles really don't hide or don't camouflage what these really are, which are concentration camps, detention camps. And we, again, have very little clear information. There's a denial by the Chinese government, as others have said, the denial that the camps even exist, and a denial as to the numbers of persons detained in them. But certainly estimates that I've seen look at huge numbers, up to 1 million indeed detained. There's no legal basis as far as we can establish for the detention facilities, certainly no substantial legal basis that would stand up in international law, and those detained have no access, it seems, to legal advice. Periods of detention, we understand, are open-ended and can last for years. Release dates are at the discretion of the authorities. We have had testimonies. Amnesty International, for example, has heard from one individual who was sent to a detention camp following a visit to Kazakhstan, who told Amnesty he was hooded, shackled and forced to stand in a fixed position for hours when first detained, and he reported that thousands of others were held in the same camp as he was. So the significance of this motion, therefore, is to shine a light on the very dark and murky region, which is being deliberately kept in the dark, if we like, because China has been so reluctant to allow any sort of international scrutiny or any media scrutiny or any NGO scrutiny of what is going on in and what is being perpetrated upon the Uyghur people. And as a result of this, it's very important, as I say, that motions like this are debated in parliaments across the democratic world, and that the behaviour of the Chinese government government and the conduct of the government is condemned, because clearly detaining people on the basis apparently of ethnic or religious identity, detaining people where they've not committed any crime or any recognisable offence for indeterminate periods of time without trial, and exposing them to torture, as we know from testimonies does go on, this constitutes multiple human rights violations. And those suspected violations should be brought to trial, and clearly there should be huge pressure put on the Chinese government to ensure that the practices of oppression of the Uyghur population are discontinued. The Irish government must play, as I say, Minister, a very strong role in ensuring this happens, and I think we would all ask you to convey the strong wishes across the floor of the Seanad that this would be done, particularly given that we now have this seat on the United Nations Security Council. And just to finish, Ireland does have a proud history, and others have mentioned it, of using our I suppose, status as a neutral country, our soft power, as others have said, to stand in solidarity with oppressed peoples in the way in which we did against apartheid back in the 1980s, I remember it well as a student, and in the strong tradition of advocating for the rights of the Palestinian people. And like others, I was proud to support Francis Black's bill, and I would really ask you, Minister, to see that that bill might be progressed in the lifetime of this government, the bill to ban imports from the occupied territories and to defend the rights of Palestinians. The Labour Party was proud to stand up on those issues and to stand in solidarity, and we continue to do so here. And I would say finally that, you know, that secular, I'm somebody who has always called for separation of church and state. I think secularism is an important principle in a democracy and in a republic, but those who use it as a weapon through which to deny others the exercise of basic human rights like freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of association and freedom from persecution, those must be condemned outright, and that's just using secularism as a weapon, and I would condemn that.
Thank you.